And hey everybody, how's it going out there? I'm trying a new sound setup this time, so we'll see how that goes, and hopefully it sounds better for you. If it doesn't, if you like the new sound setup, let me know in the comments below. If you don't like the new sound setup, I'll go back to the old one. Um, I got a cool little gadget for Christmas, and it actually has more uses than I originally thought it would have. So it's a great thing to have, and I think it would be it'll make the sound more crisp and more clear because it's not going to be at a distance. The mic is now in my face, so I usually don't find earbuds too comfortable, but these ones are actually pretty tolerable. So, and they also have a mic in them, so that's kind of cool. That being said, let's get on with the actual show. So, one of the final things I'm going to have to talk about for the new year has to do with a very close and up and coming convention, which is Further Confusion. It's Further Confusion has been around a while. They are in the California convention. They recently updated their rule set to talk about a particular type of individual that they have basically said that they are no longer welcome at the convention circumstances, and anyone who has a history of um, predatory behavior will have their membership revoked in the future. So let's go over that right now. So basically, the update to the term of service is as follows. Membership and attendance is the section that was added to. They said, though we work to ensure that all interested individuals may join us, FurCon reserves the right to deny or revoke membership for any reason, including but not limited to safety concerns and code of conduct violations. AAE, which is Anthropomorphic Arts and Education Group, which is basically the overseers of FurCon. Usually, conventions usually have a upper tier, which is like an organization that oversees those particular organizations. So basically, like you'll have, I think it's Anthropomorphics Northeast or something like that, that oversees Anthrocon. AAE is the one that oversees Further Confusion. They can choose to expand if they wish to, like as I mentioned last time, Corgi LLC oversaw multiple conventions and oversees multiple conventions still. Um, So that's basically what the AAE stands for. It's explained up in the upper parts of the thing. AAE and FurCon do not permit membership of attendance by any individual who has a convicted sex offender or appears on any federal or state sex offender registry. In addition, AAE and FurCon reserve the right at the board's discretion to deny membership or attendance to anyone with a documented history of sexual violence, including inappropriate conduct towards minors. By applying for membership in AEE or otherwise registering for any attended Further Confusion, you attest that you meet all eligibility criteria outlined in this document. Memberships or attendance revoked or terminated as a result of the code of conduct violations, illegal activities, ineligibility, or breach of conduct with AEE/FurCon are not eligible for a refund except at the board's discretion. AEE/FurCon may, but is not obligated to investigate the background of any member or attendee or follow up on any credible reports or behavior that may impact the eligibility of attendees. So that's a lot of stuff to take in. Leaves like it starts off with leaves it open to interpretation. It's kind of like it's sort of like a weird sandwich where it's like our ability to ban people is open to interpretation, and they end it with that same sort of like it's open to interpretation. So in essence, how will this be used? Mostly, I think it was to clean house. There has been, a lot of people concerned about individuals who are staff members or on staff at certain conventions that have histories um, of those kind of things, and they believe it as a safety concern. And so basically, this only not only takes care of the membership issue, it also takes care of the staffing issue, which is why I believe the AAE thing is kind of being put in here. because basically it's like it not only affects membership of attendance, it also expects membership of those who work in the actual staffing and regulation period as it is. So basically, if somebody is on a sexual predatory registry and is of a concern to the board of having them on staff at a convention such as this, they basically will take action to revoke it. This is seen as kind of an important thing in furry fandom, especially since furry fans they still tend to lean rather young, right? There's still a age sort of the bell curve of the age of people in the furry fandom still tend towards the younger group, younger demographic of young adult, like late teens, young adult sort of things. So having individuals who have a history of predation on those groups can very much be seen as a concern, and I think FurCon took the step in order to try and address that concern. Obviously, the gray area comes with enforcement and what is seen as credible documentation. Outside of like obviously, if the federal government, the state government says this person is guilty of this crime and puts them on a registry, that's pretty much cut and dry for most people. I say most people because justice system is imperfect as anything else is, but it's for most people it's cut and dry. When it comes to like other individuals saying here's some documentation to prove that this guy is guilty or not guilty, that's where it gets a little gray area. Like you don't like, it's kind of like it sort of leads it as a judgment call, which is why they said, well, here's where the board comes into play. If the board decides that this evidence is credible, then they will, use their discretion in order to do that, and they will revoke the membership if the board finds it credible. So it's going to put a lot of faith in those who have power in this institution in order to, be able to evaluate those kind of things. Which is kind of why I think they put in that last sentence saying that they really have no obligation to determine whether or not a claim is credible or not. So if you as a random person have had an individual, like if you as an individual has had another individual abuse you as an individual, and you go directly to this convention board, before going to actual authorities, it's not going to be in your best interest because it's going to be like a he said she said kind of thing, which is why it's important to network properly and to get as much evidence as you can to people who are authorities who could do things, and to do it as soon as possible. Because there's where this kind of gray area comes into play, is where you have the obvious ones, which is like individuals who have records of their issues, such as the Sangi individual in the West. But then you have this sort of area where a person's been arrested for such things, but they were not held criminally liable, either because the charges were dropped in the court of law, which I did a video up there about one individual like that in Pennsylvania, where they were criminally charged with being part of a sort of predatory ring. All right, but but later the charges were dropped, even though other people in that ring were found legally liable for it. The one individual was not. So they must have proved in the court of law that he was innocent, even though the people he associated with were not so much. And he just got caught up in the whole thing as a result. So someone like him might be allowed, or not allowed, depending on the discretion of the board, right? More than likely, a person like that would probably be allowed because he said, here's my time in court. The court found me innocent, and it was those other people who were guilty, et cetera, et cetera. Then you got somebody like the one other person I talked about on this channel who was Snake Thing, Levi Snake Thing Simons, who was arrested for abusing animals in such a way. And then was let go because the statute of limitations for Oregon was up on that particular crime. So basically, more than 2 years had passed for that particular crime, and it wasn't one of those exceptional crimes. There are statute of limitations on felonies in Oregon of 2 years, apparently, and then like If it goes beyond that, like it depends on what it was. If it was a murder, if it was a rape of a human, those kind of things, like they would say, well, the statute of limitations is not is sort of null and void, or is 6 years, or is farther than the original 2 year premise, but all other felonies, it's 2 years. Um, and Levi fell outside that, so he was let go even after he was charged or arrested and detained for that for the whole there's that whole zoo sadist leak sort of thing that occurred earlier this year. As a result, someone like him, the board might go, you got out on a technicality, but you're not getting out of here. We're not going to allow you at the convention. Or they could, say that, like, okay, nope, he's allowed. Like, it's that's where that sort of gray decision area making, and that's going to be the challenge for those people on staff. Is how do they deal with those gray areas? Of like, technically they didn't get, detained or put onto a registry, but technically it's because of some, technicality, and it's like, okay, that's sort of silly and sort of things like that, and that's going to be where that sort of gray area is going to give them a lot of headaches. I'm pretty sure, because it's like there's going to be people who are like, you should ban this guy because this is what happened, and there's going to be people like, well, you shouldn't ban someone just because, and until they are proven guilty in the court of law, and so that debate's going to be something that occurs, and ain't much you can do about that. The debate was already occurring whether or not they had this rule or not, as to whether it was a responsibility of a convention to be more pertinent on doing this thing. And further confusion finally decided, yes, it should be the responsibility of a convention to make sure that there are good actors in place, and that bad actors don't get into positions. They go into a little bit further on the termination and revocation things. It says, in the rare case that a membership needs to be revoked prior to the event dates, we will attempt to provide notification via the individual's registered email address. If a membership is revoked during the event, the individual will need to be notified in person and be required to turn in their attendance badge. Only the convention chair or board of directors are authorized to revoke or terminate memberships and attendance prior to the event date. During the event, the convention chair, executive on duty, and Flair, which I believe is their like sort of Dorsai security group. They're not the Dorsai, they're Flair. They're different. They're a different organization entirely, but they fulfill the same function. Are authorized to revoke and terminate memberships. Additional individuals may be granted authority to revoke or terminate memberships and attendance at the director of the board at the board of directors' discretion. Revocation during the event may be reviewed by visiting convention operations and requesting to speak to the executive on duty. Outside of the event, revocation may be reviewed by contacting the board of directors at board@anthroarts.org. So basically that goes about like how you go through the appeal process and other such things, which, particularly when you have new rules like this where, people are making judgment calls and things like that, then really it might be an individual making an assessment at the time, but most likely this sort of thing will always be decided by the board of directors. Because it is more important to have more hands sort of in the pot and more understanding. It's like coming to a consensus on whether an individual has gone too far has run afoul to the spirit of that letter of that rule. And that's the same case with any ruling or anything like that, particularly when it comes to revocation of convention access and things like that. So, I mean, there's going to be, like, in my personal opinion, obviously, I think making it clear who you allow at a convention, who you don't allow at a convention, and having clearer and more written out rules is a better thing. Because literally, I mean, every convention board rule thing could literally be that first sentence and then call it a day. You know what I mean? Like, well, we can ban you for whatever reason we want, and we have power, and ha ha ha. But it is really better to spell out sort of the premises in which you will run afoul of their rule sets, such as like what sort of costumes are or not allowed, what sort of things. Because it's better to not be taken by surprise, right? Rule sets are good because you can, you won't be taken off and taken by surprise on things like that. I think the biggest critique that I've seen for this rule set currently is of those individuals who are older and have made poor life decisions in their early parts of their lives and had gotten their hands caught in the cookie jar and gotten in trouble for those very acts that the new rule outlines, and they feel like, oh man, I'm being shut out because of a mistake that I made when I was younger. And it's like, well, wouldn't you rather that the rule be placed out there for everybody to see now and go, here, this is a consequence that can happen if you make that mistake in your youth now, like, or if you make that mistake at all. There are bigger consequences than just dealing with jail time and dealing with all that other stuff that comes with it. You're going to have to deal with the issue that a furry convention is going to, like, a furry convention may or may not ban you, and if you're a furry, is that important to you? And it's better, in my mind, it's like to have that in the back of the mind of individuals who, might go, oh, I'm going to risk it. Obviously, I don't understand the mindset of individuals like that, because I don't have that sort of drive. I don't understand like where that sort of mentality comes from. But if that's there and they're like, well, this person, like, if they know in the back of their head that they can get in trouble for something like that, then they'll take more precautions to make sure that they're not running afoul of the law and that they're not running afoul of that, so that they won't lose their privileges to attend a furry convention. And I think that's better to have that rule set out there for people to see rather than having it be a gray area and then sort of like, secretly banning them and then sort of like let the rule set be there so that people can see it and make that a part of their assessments when they're taking their actions, and knowing the consequences of said actions rather than making it a secret kind of thing. Um, so to me, I'm kind of, obviously I'm for this kind of rule set. Obviously, there are going to be people who are against it, particularly those who are like, well, they might want to come clean and they might want to change their behaviors. There are other, I think, as Equivamp sort of was going on at the comment section, I kind of agree with Equivamp in that there are other sort of things that are probably more important than a furry convention, for those who have been charged with criminality and have a criminal background history, in trying to reintegrate into society, such as acquiring a job, acquiring good housing, and things like that. Like being able to reintegrate people with criminality into society is something that, yes, the United States absolutely needs to work on. I think that there are groups of civilians that we could probably um, work on that first for, such as people who are in drugs or gangs or any of those, like, you know, non-violent, non like extreme predatory behaviors. Drug dealing is somewhat of a predatory behavior, but it's not like an extreme predatory behavior. Um, non-violent crimes and things like that. We really like that's to me. It's like that's where a lot of our focus should be on, sexual predation and like other things like that. Like we can eventually work our way to try to figure out how to reintegrate individuals like that. But to me, it's like there's higher priorities. To other people, they might say, well, that's sort of a jerk thing to say. But to me, it's like, you know, we we have so much time and so much resources. The furry fandom is not supposed to be a reintegrate. The furry fandom is not going to solve the issue of um, criminality and reintegration, and our conventions aren't really built for that purpose. So to me, it's like I don't see any big issue on it. It's like, well, if you got banned for some silly thing, it's like, well, if I get banned, I get banned. if I went afoul of the rules, then I should be banned just as anyone else should. Anyone on staff should be banned for violating the rules just as anyone else should. So basically, since I haven't done anything like that, no worries for me. But and yes, I empathize with those who really want to change their ways. But furry convention is a want and not a need. At the end of the day, for me anyway. My personal opinion on that. But so that's all I'm going to talk about on this one. What do you feel about this particular updating the rulings? I don't know whether or not this is going to catch on to other conventions. It certainly, that sort of political thing is going to be an interesting thing to see, whether or not this sort of ruling by further confusion spreads to other conventions, or if and this sort of wording spreads to other conventions. I think other conventions are going to see how this plays out as far as further confusion goes, and like they're probably going to keep their eye on it and see like, okay, do we want to implement something like this ourselves? And further confusion certainly is certainly one where I think the board can take a little bit of a risk. I think that they see like their attendance numbers are kind of stagnating. They are certainly not going to be winning any super they're kind of like they're not like in the top dogs anymore. They used to be like the second or third first convention, so they could take a little bit more of a risk, I think, with updating their policies and seeing how those policies impact their convention. Since their attendance is sort of like it's not really growing crazy, it's not declining, it's sort of in the stagnation. So it's a really good convention to test it out and see if it has any impact or anything like that. But that being said, I do have one last statement to make on this particular rule. And while, yes, further confusion ruling here does make things, you could argue that it makes things safer for convention attendees, but I have to emphasize that it only protects against those who have a history of sexual predation. There are individuals in the world around you that don't have a history of sexual predation, who could or a documented history of sexual predation that could still be predatorial. So just because a rule has been passed does not mean that you should lose any vigilance when it comes to protecting yourself and protecting others around you from individuals that could not have their best interests in mind and could be in it for themselves and be a sexual predator or perform such a behavior. So the same thing applies. Like, don't take drinks from strangers. Like, keep an eye on your drinks. Make sure that you have a buddy system. Check in with people. Other things such as that. Just because there's a rule in place that makes people feel safer doesn't necessarily mean that all the dangers that are supposed to be addressed by new rules means that those particular instances can go away, or those particular dangers are eliminated entirely. So it's very important that you remain vigilant, and just because there's a rule in place at a convention that makes you feel safer means that you should be doubly sure that you keep your vigilance up and make sure that you because not everybody has a history, because somebody has to do something before they have a history, right? So there are individuals out there who don't have a history yet, but they could very well become that. Obviously, hopefully rules like this deter individuals from behaving in such a manner. That's a hope of mine, but you can't guarantee such things. So anyways, I'm going to get the hop out of here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the other side of 2019. So if you like this content, kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section on your feelings on this particular thing. It's pretty political, so it'll probably get a little heated, I'm sure. But just remember to keep it sort of civil, as much as YouTube can be. YouTube, the only place that has worse comment section than Flair.com. Congratulations. That's not an award or anything, YouTube. Anyways, I'm going to get the hop out of here. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good one.